What's up, you guys, and welcome to another episode of Philline. Today, we have a double hitter just in time for Asian American Heritage Month and Mental Health Awareness Month. I have two of my friends for this episode, Gabby and Bettina, and I'm super excited to have them on this episode and just talk about everything Filipino and what it's like living in this country as a Filipino American. So, let's just get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Philline. I have two amazing friends on this episode, Gabby and Bettina. So, a little backstory, and I have to say it, we recorded a full hour session on Friday, and this whole random thing happened where half of the audio was cut off, so I was really upset. So, this is actually our round 2 recording, but I'm really excited to have them again for another hour of talking.
I felt
So,
like we got invited again a second time on Ellen DeGeneres' show. So every time you do the intro, I got to hear it a second time, and I was still envisioning us walking in. So it's an honor to come in a second time. I felt like last time was a warm up, and now we're
yeah.
ready.
There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, I definitely. So I guess I wanted to start with how is everything going? I know we talked about everything on Friday, but has anything new happened, or how are you guys feeling this month?
I guess. Oh, I have a good. How was your guys' Mother's Day?
It was good.
Because that was this weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to because we usually when we celebrate a holiday or something, we go out to eat, and my parents are the most indecisive people on this planet. And we went to a hot pot place actually, and it was
Mm.
only a half hour wait. My parents got impatient, so okay, they were like, let's go somewhere else. So we went somewhere else, and that was another 30-minute wait, but it actually ended up being an hour, and it was awful. So we
Right.
didn't have lunch, we had dinner.
No. I went to go see my mom. I was so nervous at first. Well, okay, backtracking. Last week on Wednesday, Jungwoo and I went to go to Target. Jungwoo's my
Mhm.
boyfriend, and we had to get Mother's Day presents. And I was like, if we go to Target, we'll be able to find something that our moms like. Like if you just shop at Target, you'll find something to
Mhm.
to get. Yeah. So, um, I got this coloring book for my mom, and I said, "Hey, do you think your mom?" Jungwoo's Korean, by the way, and his mom is Christian,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Do you think your mom would like a coloring book?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know if she's into art the same way you and your mom are." And then I found this really pretty um biblical coloring book with a lot of verses from the Bible, and the artwork
Aw.
was so pretty. And I showed it to him, and he's like, "Oh, I think she would actually really like this." And I felt so good because that was my choice, and I was like, "I knew I could find something for your mom." Like Target has everything for literally every type of mom. And
Yeah.
so we got her that and some colored pencils.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, yeah, I was really excited about it because I obviously always want to impress her, and I'm like, Jungwoo,
Yeah.
make sure you tell her that this present was from me and I picked it and not you. And he told me that it was the first thing he said when he gave it to her. He's like, I'm not gonna take credit for this. You're the one that literally found this and thought about her. Um, so I was as I was driving here, I was thinking of questions to ask you guys because I feel like my parents don't care if I date a Filipino person, but I've had cousins and friends, like East Asian and South Asian
Mhm.
and Pacific
Yeah.
Islander friends whose parents genuinely do care that that their child is dating someone of the same ethnicity. And I wonder if you guys had a similar experience to that or know people that have had a similar experience to that.
You know what? I think it's pretty weird because as much as there are a lot of other Asians and their parents that may not be so accepting or
Mhm.
tolerating of their children dating other races,
Mhm.
Filipinos are that weird exception because there's so many Filipinos that have dated people or married people who are
Mhm. Mhm.
part of another race. I have family who married
Mhm.
Black people who married white people, some married like Latinos. Like it's become so like
Oh,
diverse, and I feel like my family's been so much more open to that, just
oh,
exposure wise.
okay.
Right.
Okay, that's
So,
interesting.
you know, like I have like cousins who married like white men, or like vice versa, like married a white woman. Like, you know, I think it's more tolerating. I don't know. I
I
can't speak from
see.
other Filipino families, but like at least in mine and from my experience, my parents were a lot more like open-minded about that. So there was never really like a cap on who I can date. I think what was weirdly more important to my parents was like their religion.
Oh, so yeah,
Mhm.
I see,
So
I see.
so like both my parents grew up as Catholics, and I grew
Yes,
up as a
yeah.
Catholic. So, you know, it was really interesting to see that my dad was like, "Oh, what religion is he?" And I was like, "Oh, his religion." So
Right, right.
yeah, and my boyfriend, his name is we call him Woo, but he's my boyfriend and he's Korean. But weirdly, he's like one of the very few Koreans I know who are Catholic. So I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
wow, that was just such a major coincidence that it worked out that way.
Right,
Wait, what
right.
religion are most Koreans?
Christian.
Mhm.
Oh,
But,
I see.
I've also met Buddhist
Yeah,
Koreans, so
yeah, different mix.
I don't know much about Korean culture outside of my boyfriend, and
Yeah,
one
I don't
time
either.
I nannied for a Korean family,
Mhm,
but that's, like, the extent of what I would know. I dated a Filipino boy once, and I I feel like my parents just want me to date somebody that like has the same values as me and respects me. And it was never like them being like, "Oh, yay, she's dating a Filipino boy." Like I think at the core they're more concerned about like, does this person genuinely care about me? Do they want
mhm,
to start a family with me? Do they respect my family? Do they respect my boundaries? Do they understand who I am? And I feel like that's more important. But I've seen it go the other way for my friends who have
mhm,
parents that really want them to date someone within their culture.
I think for me, my family was mostly like dating other Filipinos. I think me and my sister are the first kind of generation to kind of break out of that. Like even my ex-boyfriend, he was Filipino. And
Oh
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
I mean, I feel like out of nowhere, I initially was just attracted to just Filipinos, and that was just how I feel like that's how it was like everywhere around me and my family, my friends. They were always dating like Filipinos. And out of nowhere, I think when I went to Rutgers and I was like really experiencing different people, different cultures, that's when I was like, it won't be so bad. And my parents at first were like, oh, a little shocked, but that's because I was the oldest child.
Okay,
They
okay.
expected me to date a Filipino. Like my mom
mhm,
kind of was weird about it at first, but it kind of ties back to that religion thing that they
mhm.
would rather focus on. Honestly, I feel like they're more focused on if they have a religion or not, period. Like it doesn't matter
Yeah.
what religion as long as like I feel like
Oh, I like
religion's
that. I
important.
like that.
Yeah.
I was going to say because I do feel like in Filipino culture, religion is very important.
Mhm.
Mhm,
How often do you feel like both of you practice it, or do you feel like it's more of your parents' practice? Because I've seen from my own friends feeling like, oh yeah, it's my parents' religion, which is valid. That's a valid
mhm.
statement.
Mhm.
But what about for you guys?
Well, for me, I think like I I grew up in it so much that
Hmm.
I didn't come to resent it, but I didn't understand it fully until I was older.
Right,
So it was one
Yeah.
of
right.
those things that like I I didn't really appreciate much when I was a kid because it was kind of like pushed onto me. But like as I'm older now, you know, it does give me that sense of security, and like I don't know, it gives you like a sense of hopefulness,
Yeah.
I
religion in
agree. Yeah.
general. So, you know, I like find comfort in that, and I understand it, and I kind of like, you know, I like practice it. I try going to church on Sundays when I can. Like I try to encourage like me and my boyfriend go on to church on Sundays, and then we would grab
Mhm.
lunch after.
Oh my gosh, I
Um,
don't think Jungwoo would. I mean, I would really have to like convince Jungwoo, and I would never make him because like
Yeah,
that's my
no,
family's
and that's the
religion.
thing. I never made
Yeah,
my boyfriend either. Like, you know, it was
yeah,
always kind of a
of course,
choice. Like, if he didn't want to, I would go with family. You know, so
yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
it wasn't a big deal. You know, like what's it called? Yeah, but ultimately, like like in the future, I think I wouldn't push religion more onto my children if I ever have any.
Right.
And
Mhm.
I think like it's something that you can appreciate a lot more when you're older and can
Mhm. Mhm.
understand fully. So I think, yeah, I think it just takes time and more maturity, honestly.
I have like this memory to this day. Every time I think of church, all I can think about is my older sister's Holy Communion, and she wore this white no, yeah, it was her communion. It was her communion because she
Yeah.
was wearing this white dress. First of all,
Hmm.
Steffi does not like dresses and has never liked dresses, so this was like horrible for her to
And
begin
that's what
with.
I'm
And I was
saying.
Yeah.
When you
right,
push it on to
right,
kids, like it can be kind of like
right.
so aversive that they don't even want to go to church or
Like
learn
Yeah.
like the
it's
religion at all, you know?
yeah, but and then, like and my mom felt bad about that already, and then we go
Mhm.
there, and we were very, very poor when we moved here. When
Hmm.
we immigrated here when I was only 3 years old, and we were staying in Sayreville in a two-bedroom apartment where me, my dad, and Stephanie would share 1 bed, or my dad and I would share, a full-sized bed, and Steffi had a twin-sized bed, and we connected all 3 beds to make 1 big mattress for the 3
Oh,
of
wow.
us. And in
Wow.
a separate room, my mom and Kayla shared a queen size bed. I've never seen a crib in my life. We just shared beds. So when Kayla was born, I don't think she even had a crib. Like, and I'm sure there are people that are like, "Oh my god, like how could this mother not have a crib for her daughter?" But it's like we were fucking poor and we had very
Yeah.
little resources and we make it work. And I see mothers all the time that have very little resources that make it work. But that's besides the point. So
Mhm.
um, again, so my point is we grew up really poor. And
Yeah.
so we get to this communion. My mom's feeling bad because Steffi doesn't want to wear this dress. And now Steffi, it basically looks like a half slip. Like it looks like the white dress, like the portion that you would put under the poofy white part. And like my mom already thought it was so pretty. And we get there and the fucking cherry on top of the sundae, like every kid there, we were like the only ethnic people. It was like
Oh no.
a very Caucasian communion that day. And
Yeah.
like the dresses were just like they looked like wedding dresses. And I remember
Yeah.
Yeah.
to this day my mom having a memory like I hated that I brought Steffi there and I made her wear that dress, but I also hated that she had the dress that looked like the ugliest dress. I was like, it wasn't the ugliest dress. And even if it was objectively the ugliest dress, she didn't want to wear a dress anyways. She probably
Yeah.
wanted to wear a suit. So, I mean, anyways, I just felt so bad. I remember her being like, I felt so bad, like having Steffi up there, and all of those other
Yeah.
girls were wearing those dresses, and she was wearing that. And to this day, my mom always says that story. She always remembers it. I also remember that communion. Um, and and then afterwards, Kayla and I had like poofy dresses because I just remember my mom feeling bad. She never wanted us to feel poor or like she
Yeah,
never
I
wanted
think
us
that's
to
what a
feel
lot of
like
parents
I
feel like,
Yeah.
you know.
yeah, yeah, and oh my god, I was talking to Jungwoo this week because I was like, I used to have these fantasies as a child that like we won the lottery. Like I would constantly think like if we win the lottery, like we won't ever have to worry about this ever again. And I
Yeah.
had this neighbor
Mhm.
because we grew up in like honestly like the ghettos of Saraville, and I had this neighbor and like people would just like leave their kids outside and we would go to play. And I had
Mhm.
this one neighbor and I was like, "Hey, if we get like a metal detector, like we could find gold and we'll be rich and we don't have to live like this anymore." And
Mm.
uh, yeah, I was telling Jungwoo that and he's like, "I remember," and he also grew up in a very similar situation when he immigrated here, sharing a bedroom with his family and sharing a bed with his family. And he was like, I used to have like dreams of wanting to make it big too.
Wow.
Because I felt like being really little, like, and watching our parents
Mhm.
struggle, like, I couldn't put
Yeah.
a narrative or a dialogue in my brain about what they were experiencing, except that at a young age, I could connect that we didn't have money and that that was what was making things hard for us.
Was that similar for you too, Feline, when you were younger? Because I know you and Bettina both immigrated from the Philippines at a young
Mhm.
age.
Honestly, I don't know how you remember so much of your childhood because I
Oh yeah, it's so bad. It's so bad. I
I
can remember
remember.
stuff until yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like the only things I really remember was moving out of our apartment because we moved around at first when I moved here. I think but we were mostly in apartments as well. But I remember
Mm.
just my family's like house and how that was built from the ground up.
Mm,
But I do remember that my dad was always telling me like, "Oh, I don't want you to live the life that I had," because he came from
always,
like
yeah.
one of the poorest cities in the Philippines, and he had it like so poor. The only thing they would have is rice if they're even lucky. And they were lucky enough to live by the ocean so they can like fish and stuff. Their house is
Yeah,
literally like
yeah.
5 minutes from the ocean. But my dad would literally have to steal dinner. He'd have to portion out things. And he is one out of, I believe, 16 children. My
Oh my
grandma was,
gosh. She's
you
a
she had a
busy
lot of
Yeah.
woman.
she was busy. But
That's such a
it's,
Filipino thing though. Like
yeah.
my
Mhm.
mom's sisters too. There's like 9 of them. Ooh, I have a story when you're done.
Yeah, I'm almost done, but it's just I think they're just I feel like they never really tried, or at least they made even like the worst scenario great. No matter how we were living,
Yeah.
they always just
Mhm.
made the mood like kind of lively. So I don't know, I feel like in my childhood I do remember just mostly happy things, just appreciating everything that we have. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, I'm pretty sure we were struggling, but I wish I could remember as vividly as you, Bettina.
Oh
No.
my god, my mom and dad say that I have, like, a very painfully vivid memory, like, I
Yeah,
could
like,
remember what
props to
people were
you. I can't remember
wearing.
shit.
I don't know
I think it's
why.
like yeah, but I totally like see how that's also such like an ingrained Filipino culture thing because like
Yeah.
Okay,
our country
yeah.
in general is a very impoverished country, but you
Yeah.
Yeah.
know, you can come by and you could see even in like the poorest kind of cities or towns, everyone is still so like, you know, happy. Obviously not happy to like an extent that, you know, their lives aren't difficult, but
Yeah.
like that they make the most out of their situation. Like everyone's so friendly with each other. You eat dinners with like your neighbors, like everyone knows each other, asks how you are. It's so
It's like a very communal,
Mhm.
like, experience. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so too.
Exactly. And like
Um,
everyone has their own struggles and they like, you know, respect that and they help out each other whatever they can, you know. And that's very like weird to see here. Not
Yeah.
like not charity wise, but like cuz we do have charities and philanthropic things here, but you know, people don't like discussing about like their difficulties in life and stuff like that
Mhm.
here and in the Philippines, but in the Philippines it's kind of like we make the most out of the situation though.
Yeah.
So
right.
it's different in that regards.
Feline, you talking about your grandma made me think of my grandma, and recently, like, I was having dinner with my sister and my mom, and Kayla, my little sister, she's like, "Mom, tell Bettina the story." And she's like, "No, I don't think she wants to hear the story." And she's like, "No, she's gonna like the story. Tell her the story." And I was like, "What's the story?" And my mom's like, "Well, you see, like, obvious my mom's the youngest of her siblings, and she and her
Mhm.
older brother are like well over 20 years apart of
Wow.
the eldest in the
Wow.
family. So my grandma had like 9 kids. And so my mom was like, well, during the time of President Marcos, when a lot of people were going off to war, your
Mhm.
grandpa, he was one of the guerrilla fighters, and your grandma, she was hiding in a bunker with a lot of other women and their babies. And there were a lot of babies there that didn't
Oh
have
my
their mothers,
god.
and people were in hiding.
Oh.
Okay, we were in fucking war. People were hiding. And my
Yeah.
grandma and my mom told me that people were so hungry and there were babies that needed milk and their mom was there. And my grandma, the G she was, just breastfed these babies.
Oh my
And I was like,
Wow.
gosh.
whoa, I know, what a martyr. I was like, she just fed like the nation. She didn't feed the nation, but she fed these people that like actually needed it. And I was like, what a totally, totally different life that my grandma lives versus me crying because I'm like hungry and I don't know what, and what a privilege really on my
Mhm.
position to be like, oh, I don't know what I want to eat. And like
Yeah.
like when I really think about it, and it's so interesting to me that that's not like 7 generations ago. That is somebody who is it's me, my mom, and then my grandma.
Yep.
So it's not
Yeah.
even that long ago. It sounds like something that I would open up in the history books, but
Yeah.
I mean, I knew this woman and I told my mom, "Mom, I wish you told me this story. I wish you told me this story when I was little because one time Grandma, Lola burped Lola burped at the table when I was 7 and I didn't want to sit next to her, so I picked up my plate and I walked away. And you said, "Ay, Bitai, what are you doing? That's your Lola. Go sit next to her." And at 7, I go, "Oh, mom, like she just burped and I'm uncomfortable and it was bubbly and stinky and I didn't like it." And she's like, "Bitai, your Lola is visiting you from the Philippines."
Oh my
And
goodness.
and I was like, "Oh shit." And I don't even remember if I said my grandma, to be honest, didn't even notice this was all happening. She's like, "I don't know." She's like,
She's
"Yeah,
just
my
sitting
burps
there eating her
she's
dinner, like
eating her dinner, like knowing her burps are gross, like and, like she didn't care." So I still remember that, and I was like, "Mommy, like if you told me that, maybe I would have sat back down with Lola." Like I just felt like I was little. I barely ever see this woman because
Yeah.
I
oh yeah.
we immigrated here and we have zero family here. And my dad's mom never had the privilege to visit us here. It's very
Oh,
hard
it's hard.
if you come from a impoverished country and you're
Yeah.
trying to travel to America from the Philippines. There's this thing called TNT. Me and my
Mhm.
cousins talk about all the time. It's called Tago ng Tago, which is like you're in hiding, but it's also supposed
Uh-huh.
to sound like TNT, like the explosive bombs. But it's basically like people get worried, the government in the Philippines gets worried that if you come here to visit family, you will never
You
come
never come
back.
back.
You will
Yeah.
tago ng tago. You'll
They
just
have
keep
to make
hiding and
sure that you
hiding.
have like family, like you have obligations to get to back at home, that you didn't quit your
Yeah.
Yeah,
job, like,
they do a lot of like background checking, and it's like if you're poor, um, that gives them even more of a reason to
yeah.
not let you come visit because they're like, oh, well, obviously you're going to try and
You
live a
just
better
stay.
life in America, and we won't let you. And also, I was just
That's
feeling like
crazy.
it's crazy because I mean, that's them trying to buckle down on like a time where people were constantly immigrating for a better life, and that is very understandable. And I know so many people that have
Mhm.
wanted to leave the countries that they live in for a better life, and the way that they would buckle it down is like limit families from just like being able to see each other. So anyways,
Yeah.
that's a tangent. My dad's mom was never able to visit us because of that either, and she said that she had such a hard time at the embassy trying to get a green card, a visiting visa,
Mhm.
that it traumatized her so much and she didn't want to come. And my mom said the embassy, when she tried to immigrate here, was also just so like such a shit show of an experience for her because my dad was here in America for a whole year without my mom, and my mom was in the Philippines. And
Yeah.
the plan was that they would move here a year after, once like everything settled in. And my mom said the paperwork of doing that was the most stressful experience of her
Oh, I
life.
can imagine.
Yeah, and like me as a baby, like she barely has maternity leave because her company didn't provide that. And she told
Yeah.
me she was
Mhm.
like signing papers and doing paperwork, breastfeeding me and crying. And she was having like the hardest time. And she even tells me the plane ride, she still remembers like the plane ride she had immigrating here being like really difficult for her. Like, she's such a bad bitch for doing all of that, though. Like,
Mhm.
it takes
Yeah.
so much resilience to do that, to pick up every single thing and go to the most unknown place that you've ever known. And I just, yeah. Anyways, long story short, I just wish I knew that story about my Lola. Because maybe
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have got it up from the table. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's
so
Sorry.
so cute though. No, that's
yeah.
cute.
Mhm. Like, it's
Yeah.
just so different because, like, my parents also immigrated from the Philippines to here, but they were like,
Mhm.
they did it under like a work visa and then got their citizenship here.
Right.
So, and then I was born here, so I never had to like immigrate with my parents or, like all of the stuff like that. So I felt kind of privileged in that sense that my family kind of built their home here from like the ground up because it was
Right.
just the two of them and stuff like that.
Right.
And they were also working here for like an X amount of time. Like, they're both physical therapists, so like it was kind of funny they met through like a work scenario. Like, I think my dad was like subbing at like the hospital or something like that. And then he met my mom and then they went on a date and then like the rest is history and then I got born and stuff like that.
Right.
But like
Right.
but it was kind of like, they didn't have to bring a whole family because it was just them by themselves. They met as
Right.
individuals in America, which is
Yeah.
so different from like, both of you guys, and that's like just a different struggle itself.
I feel like this is kind of tying into the fact that it's like National Asian American Heritage Month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool just knowing that even just 2 generations ago, it was so much different. Like my grandparents, I didn't even know this until recently. So basically, where my grandma lived, everyone knew everybody. So, you were well aware of your neighbors' social status, your neighbors' like
Right.
wealth status, blah blah blah. Because it's always a tight community there in your
It's
neighborhood.
all the chismes.
Yeah.
Yes. But
Yeah. Yeah.
my grandfather's family, they were notorious for being just bad kids, poor kids, just rebellious, reckless. Like no one wanted to associate themselves with my grandfather's family. And somehow my grandfather kept like trying to get my grandma to go on a date with him and just doing all these romantic things.
Oh my
And
god.
all of my grandma's family was like totally against it. They were like, no, you will not date this guy. And you know
Mhm.
what they did? They they left the neighborhood by train and they eloped. Like
Oh my
they just left.
gosh.
Oh my god.
That's
That's amazing.
wild.
That's wild.
I know, and then I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are the same parents that are like the grandparents that are telling me to be good, go to school,
Yes.
like would yell at me if I like accidentally dropped a
Because
plate.
they
Like,
know. Because they
They
know. Because
know.
you're their child. You're their grandchild. They're like, we know you because you are us, and
Yes,
we know what
that's
you're
so true.
capable of because of what we're capable of. It like I recommended this book a while back when the three of us reconnected. It's by this Filipino author, and he's part of the LGBTQ community too. And his
Yeah.
name's Jose Antonio Vargas, and it's called Dear America: Notes of an Undocumented Citizen, and it talks about the process that he had to undergo in terms of like immigrating from the Philippines to America. And
mhm.
Wait,
he
I
was
totally
talking.
read that.
I
It
read
wasn't
it
it.
too.
I Yeah, because I recommended it to you.
Yes.
Yay! Oh, wasn't it so I have another recommendation, which is just as good, and I'll talk about it in a second, but the book
Yeah.
was so good because I love that he talked about just I love the chapter where he's like, "You have to get your story straight with the
Yeah.
embassy.
Mhm.
If you're saying that you're going there for work and for school and you're staying with this person and this person, then you better make sure your uncle, your grandma, your aunt, your cousin, everybody's saying that same story." And I'm like, "That
Yeah.
is so
Mhm.
true." Because the embassy will try to find a flaw in it and they'll send you back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
have an
hard.
Yeah, just the mental mind games to be able to like survive and find a better life. Like it's astounding to me that it has to be that difficult, and like why does it have to be that difficult? Um, I have another Filipino book recommendation, and it's called 100 Demons.
Mhm.
And it is actually a comic book with a little bit of Tagalog in it. There is this
Mhm.
Lola in the comic book, and she is raising this young girl who is American, like very American. She has ginger hair and freckles, but she was
Yeah.
adopted by this Lola, which
Oh.
Jungwoo and I were talking about. Like, oh, isn't that so interesting? Like, a Filipino woman adopting an American girl,
Yeah,
and I've
because you don't
never,
really see that.
yeah, I've never seen that. And I read this for a women in gender studies class once where we talked about that, and we were also saying like a main point in or theme in this comic book
Mhm.
is like what does it mean to be Filipino? Because this young
Mhm.
girl was not born Filipino, but the person raising her entire life was Filipino, and this girl knew Tagalog, and it was so ingrained in her identity that like the concept of being Filipino is so much more complex than that. And
Yeah.
yeah, I recommend it. It was so beautiful. It made me miss my Lola too.
I
Oh.
wanna read it. I
Yeah. Yeah,
definitely am
I'll
trying
send
my
it to
best to
us.
read more.
We could start a book club.
I would love to. I need more
I'm
books to read. I used to
serious.
read a lot when I was younger.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
me too. Me too. And
I'm
lately I've been
slacking.
wanting to read more Asian American works. Like
Mhm.
there's this new book that not new, but new to me, and I wanted to read it. And it's called Crying in H Mart. And I was like, that title
Mm.
alone,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah, that title alone
Mad
interests
relatable.
me. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like right? Um, because I feel like it's about Asian identity and
Mhm.
Mhm.
feeling feeling so estranged from your own identity too. Like,
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. I think
um,
we did talk about this
yeah,
last week where we
yeah,
were like,
yeah,
we're Asian American. We're not Asian enough to be considered, part of our home country.
Yeah.
But we're also not
yeah,
American enough to fit in here either. So,
yeah,
it's the weirdest like gray area because most Asian Americans, like mentioned before, we're first gen. Like, most Asian Americans, their parents immigrated here, or maybe their grandparents immigrated here, and we don't
hmm,
have as long a history in the United States, like in terms
right.
of our like larger growing population here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's just so different, so interesting. Like we don't have a lot of like history set here, so everything is so fresh, so new,
Yeah.
but also at the same time, like you know, there's like a lot of discrimination because we're new too. And it's one of
mhm,
the troubling things that we're seeing, especially like with the pandemic going on and all of these like hate crimes happening towards Asian
yeah,
Americans. It's so disheartening to see. And it's, as we're starting to grow as a population in America and starting to become more diverse, it's one of the things that like as like a country, we just need to start building these relationships and stop with
Mhm.
like the divides and understand where everyone's cultural and like experiences are coming from.
Yeah. I
I
think
yeah.
just
honestly in
sorry,
our
sorry, I'm on my
area.
podium. It's just oh my gosh, I literally did a presentation on this like a day ago, a day, 2 days ago, yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that like where are we? How do we fit in here?
Yeah.
So
I
I
like
think a
that. I
lot of
like that.
Filipinos struggle with that.
mhm.
I think so too. I remember, Feline, you were mentioning how like TikTok these days is like, oh, hey, like you can cook this meal and it's a
Yes.
Filipino dish. And I've been thinking about that because I was telling Jungwoo, like, I'm like, God, I'm so envious sometimes of these kids that like get to grow up in a with a social media platform like TikTok that is so queer accepting and
Yes.
accepting of race
Yeah.
and ethnicity and gender and sexual identity. And I'm like, what a privilege and time to be alive to have access to the internet where there are genuinely people just like you and you can
Yeah.
see that representation at like almost an instant. Like I personally love TikTok because I feel like lately it's been doing so good for me for my like like my body dysmorphia and my gender identity and my
Yeah.
like ethnic background and seeing like, oh, there are people that actually exist that look like me.
Oh my gosh.
And I have not been able to see that. And I mean, like when we're younger, we have access to like VHS tapes and
Oh my
like
god.
We have
we're rich.
Mulan on VHS.
Yeah, if you have the money. I wasn't that crazy though. Like, I mean, because when Mulan came out, I swear to God, that was like the first time I saw Asian representation.
Yeah.
Like, for real, and it blew my mind when I saw that. I was like, "Whoa, Disney really made, a movie with an Asian person," and I felt so
Yep.
good, and, oh my gosh, I have this memory where I really wanted to be Mulan for Halloween, and my mom's not gonna buy that Mulan costume at the costume shop because it's, like, $80.
Of
Yeah, yeah.
course. Oh, those
So she,
costumes
like
are always expensive.
goes to check, like, her maleta and, like, grabs, like, this this, like, bathrobe, and she puts, like, a clip in my hair, and she
And
goes,
then
"Go to
what?
school."
She like puts baby powder on your face, and you're like,
She's like,
"You're
"Go to
Mulan
school.
now."
Go to school. You're Mulan." And I told Jimmu,
Oh
I was like,
no.
"I think this is why, like, I have an aversion to Halloween, okay?" My mom thinks the story is so funny. And then I go to school, and the cutest white girl I've ever seen wearing that Mulan costume I wanted to buy at that costume shop.
Oh my
Oh
And I was
gosh,
like,
that's the
"No."
worst.
And I was like, "No, like, if only, like, we
Crying
won the
inside.
lottery."
She's like Whole Foods Mulan, and you're like Walmart Mulan.
And I was literally Walmart Mulan, and I was like, not even, I was Maleta Mulan, like, and we took the stuff out of the Maleta, like, with the freaking
Dude.
mothballs in
That's
it.
some great value shit, Bettina.
I And I was just like, and I couldn't, I mean, now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that upset me because of, we're living in poverty and we live in a country that doesn't support us in a time of poverty and we live in a country that doesn't support immigrants. And of course
Yeah.
I was jealous of her. Like it was the cutest white girl ever and I was so envious of her in that Mulan costume and I'm the Asian, I should be wearing the Mulan costume. But when I was and that's like what I was telling Jungwoo recently with like the words I know. But as a kid, I just remember feeling so like icky and I couldn't even put words. I was like, ugh, like I don't even want to wear this. I just want to go home. I'm wearing my fucking bathrobe to school. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh my god. I remember like my teachers trying to like explain to me that I still look like Mulan. I was like, yo, these teachers are putting in work right now for my ethnic identity.
Oh
That's
my
great. I
goodness.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I remembered as much as you. Like, I love listening to your stories because they're so descriptive. Like, damn.
I don't know. I think because me and my sisters like reference stuff all the time from our childhood, um, and my mom takes so many pictures. And you know what? I used to hate it. I was like, "Why are you taking a
Oh,
photo of this
Oh,
particular
Filipinos take
thing?"
pictures of everything.
Everything. They must
everything.
document
Oh
it,
my gosh.
and with the rise of Facebook and Instagram, now they can
Oh,
post
Oh
it.
my
yes.
gosh.
Now they can post it. Now if you are in your pangbahay and you came to visit, like, they're gonna put
Yeah.
that on Facebook, and I'm like, "Mom, why did you post that? Like, you know, the girls at Ruby Tuesday are gonna see that," and, like, that's where we used to work together.
Oh, yeah. That's how we
Yeah,
met. We missed
that's
that
how we
part.
met. That's okay. Yeah, I was just but these days, I look at those photos and it transports me back to that memory, and I'm like, "Oh, I kinda
Yeah.
remember it thanks to this photo."
Yeah, I'm glad they took photos. As much as I hated it, that I remember specifically because they took
Yeah,
so many
Mhm.
pictures all the time, and I would get so annoyed. Like, this is the
me
20th picture. Why do we
too.
have to take so much more? But
Like,
now
goddamn.
looking back at it, and I feel like I definitely don't take that many pictures, and maybe I take a lot of pictures of my dog, but just even when
Yeah,
I'm in the moment or hanging out with friends, I definitely like want to try to take more pictures just because, it's always something good to look back at and you really forget
Yeah.
most days like what goes on, who you saw, what you did, and
yeah.
it's cool to like document it in picture.
That's why you have this podcast. I mean, I think this is
Yeah.
so like a podcast is so interesting because it's a similar concept to documenting a picture, but now you get to document this conversation and it
Yeah,
lives with you.
definitely.
Oh yeah,
And
we're
I
gonna
was
listen back on this and be like, "Oh gosh, we say that."
no, I think so too. I was like at ShopRite with Jungwoo, where I don't know why. When we go to ShopRite after 9 p.m., we talk about our identity and our upbringing, and like we just have these really deep conversations. And that's when he and I were talking. Every time, like one of us goes on the deep end, and we feel either like we don't fit in with
Hmm.
the
Mhm.
people around us, or we don't fit in always with our family,
Mhm.
and that's okay. I'm always our mantra is we are Asian American. We're neither Asian nor are we American. We are an amalgam of both of those identities and we have our own unique experiences and that's what we say. And
Yeah.
lately
Yeah.
we've been talking about how like sometimes I mean, I'm fine with this and I know he is too in that we are the black sheep of our family. I was
Mhm.
reading an article recently about how black sheeps in the family help
Yeah.
to um, heal the generational trauma that your family
Yes.
experiences.
Yeah.
I was reading an article about that
I
recently.
think my generation, like me
Mhm.
and my siblings, are the black sheep as well because
Yeah.
I called like okay, it's kind of messed up how I called it, but it's just like McCullough curse that like people aren't 100% lucky when they fall in love. Like that's what happens with my grandparents. My mom kind
Mhm.
of had a similar story, except it kind of had to do with me because surprise, I was a surprise baby.
Oh,
But
that's fine. Honestly, so were me and my sisters. Birth control was not like a birth control in the Philippines has
Is
only
not
been
talked about.
like
Oh my
well,
gosh.
that and it hasn't been accessible until most
yeah,
Yeah.
recently.
I
Let's
don't
be
think it's
honest.
even
Like
do you think it's more accept because I know you talk to your cousin, right? Who's from the Philippines?
mhm.
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 And is
I
it
have
more,
cousins.
I don't know how the situation is with the birth control and like accepting like things like that.
I don't know the situation with birth control, but I will say two things. The last time I went to the Philippines, my cousins were like, "Yeah, I mean, here it's not." And this is my information from my cousins.
Uh-huh.
That's my most accredited source. So, uh, don't quote me on this. But my cousins have said, like, I mean, yeah, like our parents get pregnant, and that's it. And we don't have a form of birth control here in the Philippines. So if our parents get pregnant, that's kind of it. And
Yeah.
we had a similar setup. A second thing is, and every time I go to the Philippines, and I understand it's a privilege to go to the Philippines, it's a privilege to go see your mother country.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people don't have that accessibility, but every time I go to the Philippines, my cousins, my aunts, and my parents and my sisters text me and they go, "Bitai, if you have your period, bring tampons because
Yes. Oh my god, I
one
tried looking for some in the Philippines
They don't
too.
have
impossible,
tampons?
impossible, impossible.
No.
These days, I mean, like, I can't just go to, like, our bodega right next to the house and get a tampon.
Yeah.
I can get pads, but the pads are kind of big and itchy, and I'm like, "Oh my god,"
Yeah,
and then I
that's
have
what
these thin
happened to me
pads.
too, because I wanted to swim and then I couldn't.
I know, I know. First world honestly, though, first world problems, for real. Because my
Mhm.
cousin, we went boating, and my cousin, like, obviously she doesn't wear a tampon. She went boating, she had her period, and the boat boys helped by, like, scooping the water, the towel, and, like, clearing her legs of blood, and she was fine. I was like, "Oh,
Wha
what kind gentlemen?" Like, they weren't like,
Wow.
"Ew!" Like, what sweet island boys, like, here.
That's because there's
Mhm.
bigger problems.
Yeah, and I remember, like, I just couldn't find a tampon, so now my cousins and my aunts are like, "Well, Betai, bring that thing that you always need," and I'm like,
That's
"Okay."
crazy.
I know.
Yeah.
You have to go to like Glorietta. You have to go to like like a mall with like a pharmacy
And
and
it's
like
gonna be more
yeah.
for like it's like tourist, I think too, like where you'd
Oh,
find like
yes.
like
Yes.
the most you'd see
That's
are
a good point.
condoms in terms of birth control. Like that's the most I think you can ever find in the Philippines. But even
Yeah.
then,
Mhm.
that itself is very scarce. Like I talked to my cousin too, last time I was in the Philippines, and he was um, like what was it like do you like use any type of like birth control and stuff like that, and I was like, oh well, yeah, like I have the privilege of like being able to take medication for
Right.
birth
Mhm.
control, but I was like, how is it like there, like here in the Philippines? And he was telling me that like most girls like don't know what a condom is. They do it, but like
Wow.
the most they know is like pulling out. That's the only method, and even
Yeah.
then a lot of girls still get pregnant,
That's
so
crazy. And that's
yes.
it makes sense why my grandma had 16 kids.
I know.
Yeah. It's just like, how could you know? You just wouldn't. Like, and then they don't
Yeah.
talk about it at school. Like,
Yep.
I don't know about you guys, but my family never told me about how, like, sex worked. Like, I didn't know what
Oh,
that
no.
was. Like,
My family talked about it to me once, and it was the most awkward experience of my life because at that
I
point,
cannot.
like, honestly, honest to God, I was already having sex, and I was like, "What?" I was like, "We should have had this conversation, like, years ago." Like, "Oh, like, what?" And so at that point, I was just, like, perplexed, like, at what they could possibly be telling me that I had not known. And, no, I feel the same way. Like, I feel like accessibility to sexual freedom
Yeah.
hmm
in the Philippines is scarce. And then it's like, well, like it's like a third world country and it's already so overly populated that
Mhm.
um like to me I'm like I wish like people had the resources and the accessibility to be educated on their bodies and
yeah.
also the agency to protect their bodies in a way that feels good for them and feels what they want for themselves because
hmm
Yeah.
I mean in all honesty I don't think I think this is okay. I don't think every woman wants to be a mother, and I think women are put in positions where, like, in some places in this world where
Exactly.
they're like cornered into a place where like, oh, you have no choice to be a mother.
Yeah, and it's like so
Yeah.
sad
Yeah.
because there are a lot of girls who like, get like knocked up in the Philippines, and then,
Yeah.
their boyfriends leave them, or
Mhm.
like they're married, but it's not a happy marriage. Like, it
Mhm.
wasn't out of their choice. So, and then it becomes about their kids and less about them. So it's like, I don't know, it's just really sad to see. And we just have so many more privileges here than they
Yeah.
do there. So that's one of the
Yeah.
things I'm
I
grateful
mean,
for.
yeah, definitely in comparison. I've also been feeling like, I mean, of course, like families don't get the help that they need in the Philippines.
Yeah.
But lately
Mhm.
in America, I genuinely feel like families don't get the help that they need to thrive in America. Um,
Mhm.
I've been thinking about that too lately.
I think about that often because
Yeah.
if we're struggling here, I can't imagine how it is in third world
Mhm.
countries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I remember that all the time. Like, my parents would be like, how come you're not finishing your dinner? There are starving kids in the Philippines.
Yes,
You
all
should
the
finish your
time.
food. And I would feel so guilty. Like, I'd be like,
Yeah,
well, now I
yeah.
can't just not finish it. I got to finish it.
I
Like,
genuinely I was confused. Cuz I was growing up in a different world from my mom and dad, like in the
hmm
Yeah.
context of like the scope of what he's experienced and what he's seen in his own personal life. Like he has first-handedly seen poverty and also experienced it in like the third world country that is the Philippines. So me, his first world daughter, having a dinner and not finishing it and him saying that to me, I looked confused and I
yeah.
think in his eyes he felt hurt because I
hmm
it seemed as if I lacked empathy, but I genuinely didn't know who we were referring to and what it looked like because I was so young. And I
hmm
remember
Yeah.
him pulling up pictures, but it still seemed like such a foreign concept to me. And I knew he was trying to articulate and show me that there are different people out there that are struggling. But it was such a hard idea for me because I did not and was not living the life that he had lived. And now I'm older and I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely truly
Yeah.
empathize with that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so do you think that like your parents being real with you, because I'm sure my parents are the same way. I'm sure Gabby, your parents are probably the same
hmm
way. But do you think that them kind of being real with you and kind of harsh in a sense, just making you see like the reality of your situation, did that help kind of mature early, or did that make you more paranoid to kind of take risks in life?
I think for me, the way that it shaped, it definitely turned more into like an anxiety type
Yeah, me
attitude that I
too.
had.
Me
Yeah.
I think we
too.
did talk about this last
Yeah.
week, last
Yeah.
recording
Yeah.
too. But like I started to become more anxious about money. I started to become more anxious about like am I finishing my food? Like am I showing respect to my elders, my family?
Yeah.
Am I keeping contact with them? Like am I doing all the things that a good daughter should be doing, especially like a good
Mhm.
Asian daughter?
Yeah.
Like it just starts becoming more anxious, and I can understand the reason why, because they didn't have that type of security or maybe that type of like practice before.
Mm,
Like there are sometimes parents who may not have been raised like by their own parents. It might
yeah.
have been like through nannies or such, or
Mhm.
didn't really know any better growing up, and now they do, so it gets passed on that way. But
Mhm.
it's just and it's breaking that generational gap, because I think a lot of the things when I was told was supposed to be for my benefit, but I didn't understand the reason why. Like Bettina, it was like a foreign concept to me. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't
Mhm.
process
Mhm.
like, oh, why do I have to worry about that, or like I don't understand why. But it was just taught to me that you should, like, you just
Mhm.
should, no questions about it. That's just how it is. But
Right.
now it's like as I'm growing older, I'm trying to separate that paranoia and anxiety to what is healthy and what isn't. Like I'm
Right.
not saying blow all your money, like don't worry about money, like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
definitely you should be frugal too when you have like the capability to be, and to also treat yourself when it's appropriate. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's hard because they were also in difficult situations where they had to be very
Yeah.
frugal, and and it was probably maybe a time where they spent money when they shouldn't have, and
Yeah.
it's like I'm not going to pass that on to my children, but we don't know any better. So yeah, it's one of those things that I kind of want to teach my own kids, but in a more like respectful but informative matter. I think
Yeah.
for me it
Me
was
too.
more being more informative about it, and actually making sure that the connection is there to understanding why I'm doing this. If
Yeah.
that
Mm,
makes sense.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, I definitely felt like that too. Like honestly, growing up, and I understand what my dad was trying to say, and it was
Mhm.
him trying to say, Bettina, we've made these sacrifices that were so painful for me and your mother, and we live in this estranged country. This is what he's trying
Mhm.
to say, and I'll tell you what
Mhm.
he actually says. Um, this is how I've translated it because I know my dad loves me, and I've built this dialogue in my head thanks to therapy and
Yeah.
like working on it with my dad. But this and we live in this estranged country, and me and your mom are struggling here, but we were struggling in the Philippines, and we're doing this all for you. So please be kind to us. Please be grateful. Please see what we were doing.
Mhm.
Him,
Yeah.
when we fought, would be, Bettina, I pay for everything.
I
And I
know.
and I'd
Of
be like,
course.
and then me, American, Asian American, with
Yeah.
my with the American dialogue that I have grown up with goes, okay, well, I'll just get a job then, and then you don't have
That's
to pay for
Yeah, that
everything.
was literally my
Oh my.
conversation too.
Yeah, yeah,
You'd think
and
that solved all the problems, and you're like, "Fine, I'll just pay
yeah,
for everything myself. Fine, I'll
yeah,
just move
yeah.
out."
Like,
Oh,
oh,
these are the rules
I'm
under your house?
yeah.
Fine, I'll leave. I'll get
Oh,
my own place. Like,
Yeah, yeah, and as I get older, I'm like, "No, he was trying to say this, and this is how I should be speaking back to my dad. This is how I should expect him to speak back to me." And I can say, "Are you trying to say that you're are you trying to say that you love me, you hate what I'm saying, you feel like I'm spending money that is your money, and we've worked
mhm.
really hard for this money, and you've worked really hard
yeah.
to be here, and it's hard to be in America. It's hard to have a place here in America. Is that what you're trying to say? Or are you trying to say, bitch, like, I pay for your shit?" So, and I know what he's trying to say.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
there's
Mhm.
a language barrier, and he's limited on the English that he is able to say to me. There's a language barrier because although my ear is fluent with Tagalog, it's not perfect. And so when we fight, it's like such a disconnect.
yeah.
And these
Mhm.
days, I'm like, what is he truly trying to say?
Yes. Oh
Yeah.
my god. I'm trying so hard, like, when I was arguing with my parents, I try so hard, like, "What is your
Hmm.
point exactly? I really don't
Mhm.
understand, like, what the issue is." Like,
Yeah,
Sometimes it would
yeah.
just be
Like,
because
"Please
I
please
told you
explain, I'm
so.
you're
confused."
coming from such a very different upbringing that they
Yeah,
have,
Mhm.
and it's your brains and your minds and like where your stand is so different from one another, and it's so
yeah,
interesting because there are parents that have lived here for generations that when they fight with their kids, I'm sure there is a generational disconnect, but when there's a cultural disconnect,
Mhm.
and when
oh,
your
yeah,
parents are the immigrant and you are the Asian American and you have to communicate with each other, and there
Oh,
is some
yeah.
kind of barrier that is blocking you guys from seeing each other's intentions, then the
yeah,
argument like gets even more difficult because it's like I don't want
Yeah.
to fight with my mom, but I feel like she doesn't understand me. And
yep,
Mhm.
lately it's more like, Bettina, stop trying to whitewash, Americanize, or colonize your parents. Why don't you just try to hear what they're trying to say in the limited sphere of what they're capable of like speaking towards you, and like what can you do to help them say what you need them to say back? And that's what I've been thinking about lately in therapy because and I do feel like my parents and I have been putting in the work, and I want us
yeah.
to talk to each other. And I
Yeah.
know we are in a much different space now, but there was a time in college and high school, especially, where I
Oh,
had
me
this
too.
Same.
expectation for my
Yeah.
parents to communicate to me
Yeah,
as if they were white. And
Mhm.
I hate that I was trying to like whitewash my parents in a space where I was growing up in a high school where I felt like I had to be whitewashed to protect
Mhm.
myself.
yeah,
Mhm. And you know what's
100%.
like interesting?
Right.
I think this is like a
Mm.
common problem with most Asian Americans too. Like
Yeah,
I joined this
Yeah.
Facebook group called Subtle Asian Mental Health, and people would
Uh-huh.
like talk about like their different mental health issues, and most of them are like family, that
yep,
like cultural disconnect and how it like
Yeah.
affects their
Yeah.
mental health, and how to like really put each other on the same grounds of understanding each other. So it's like so difficult, and I think it's I don't know about you, but I experienced the same thing with my parents, or like
yeah,
I don't know about you, Feline, but like I don't know, it's hard. It's hard.
it is.
Yeah.
I've
Um,
had multiple arguments with my parents where I literally the only thing I'd have to resort to is that we're in America and this is a new place. It's not how things are here, unfortunately. And
Mhm.
it's going to be different
mm,
this time around. And that was
mhm.
always my argument when I was
Mhm.
fighting with them when I was younger. But now, same thing as Bettina, I do
Yeah.
listen to what they're saying and I definitely understand where they're coming from. So now I start with, I understand where you're coming from, but
I
like,
my yeah. That's I like that. I do something similar, but I go, "I understand where you're coming from, but do you understand where I'm coming from?"
That's a good question though, because
Yeah.
sometimes they
Yeah.
truly don't, and I
And
never ask them that.
I
I
get
try to
told
ask
like, "Oh,
them,
I was a teenager once," or like, "I was 20 something
Oh,
once."
that's I hate
Oh,
that.
but
I
then
know, right? They're like, "When I was your age," like,
no, but they were
Triggered.
but listen, they were in the Philippines when they were doing that shit. It was different. They're living a different life. Like, I wish they could if I remember in college, I was like, if I wanted my mom and dad to truly understand me, they would have to live the life I am living right now, like,
Yeah,
in the
that's
yeah,
true.
like
present.
all our
Yeah.
childhood
Yes.
experiences with other people, it's just so different. And like,
Yeah.
yes, I understand at one point you were our age, and obviously you had the same inclinations that we had. Like, they probably didn't like their parents at one point too. That's just a teenager thing,
Oh,
growing
yes.
up.
Right.
But like, there's still just so many disconnects. Like, I'm allowed, I can go to sleepovers with girls and we're not going to do shady stuff. Like, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm,
I didn't know a lot of people that did shady stuff who were like 12 or 11. Like,
Yeah.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
I don't know, but it was just like, yeah, it's that cultural disconnect, and it's so difficult. And I just wish like they can understand, but at the end of the day, like, I know they won't, and it's just being okay with it. I feel like that was the hardest part,
Mm.
like, just being okay with it, and like, know that it's okay. They're not going to understand where you're coming from.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
I have, like, faith in our parents to, like,
Hmm.
get to a space where they, like,
They
take
can
us seriously and
respect.
understand. Yeah, and I've
Yeah.
definitely, like, in the past, like, decade, have seen, like, a tremendous change in,
Me
like,
too.
the way right? In the
Yeah.
ways in which my parents make an effort to understand me, and I've been thinking about, um, my queerness and my older sister's queerness and, like, the idea of, like or the experience of coming out of the closet and my
Mhm.
parents just being very taken aback at first, which is
Hmm.
understandable, only to like and also being like very homophobic and prejudiced at first. But
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that's okay. They came from a place that really
Hmm.
condemned that and didn't
Yeah.
humanize people. And I feel like from a like old school Roman Catholicism,
Hmm.
um just yeah. So I feel like these days, I feel like they've really turned it around, and I feel like they do their reading and they try to stay woke and they try to
Aw.
humanize like my identity and my sister's identity. And Jungwoo and
Yeah.
I were
Hmm.
talking about this too, about his parents, and like if you see that your parents are making an effort, like they're jumping through like
Yeah.
cultural leaps of their own experiences to understand you, and you as their child is like such a foreign concept to them.
Yeah.
Like, forget about moving to a foreign country. Like, imagine raising your child, and it's like somebody you're really unfamiliar with.
And I think that's like
So,
literally how they
mm,
feel when they're with us,
yeah.
because they're like, why is this child acting this way?
Yeah.
They're
Like,
like,
this
did
is
I raise
wearing the
them this
Mulan
way? Like,
bathrobe.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's not like, it's not just the way that you've raised me, but it's also like my experiences with other people. And, I can't change that. That's my environment too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, I think the pivotal moment was when I graduated college because literally every second of my life from high school all the way up to the end of college was, why, for example, why can't I go to the movies at a certain
mhm.
day with certain people, with boys probably? I don't
Mhm.
remember the exact argument, but they'd be like, well, you can do whatever you want when you're in college or when you graduate and have your own place to live and blah, blah, blah. And even though it was really tough sometimes, I really didn't have that much of a social life in high school because I was always so afraid of asking my parents to,
Yes.
Oh,
go
yeah.
places. But I feel like kind of when I graduated college, they were like, okay, we did our job. She is done, we can relax a little bit. And I think that really, I've seen a huge change in them since then. And
Mhm.
we've been talking more, really. I think that's also the thing. We've just been communicating more and just being more open about things. I feel like that was not a thing in high school. I was too afraid to talk to them. And
Mhm.
now I see them as, they're people, they're not just my
Mhm.
parents, they're people. They make mistakes. They're still learning life. And it
Exactly.
it just hit me, like after college, that they're still growing.
They're still
Yeah.
growing, and I think there's a lot of pressure for parents to be perfect parents and to parent
Yeah.
properly. And
Yeah.
I think I'm
Especially in our culture
realizing,
too, it's like so
yeah,
scrutinized. Like,
Yep.
why would you let your daughter do this? Or like, did you
Yeah.
hear like blah 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 was a dropout or whatever?
or
Like,
even, yeah, or even just like me myself growing up shaming my parents for their parenting styles and
Yeah.
mhm.
doing wrong when
Yep.
I realized like they are humans too with their own complexities and their own traumas and things that they still will continue to work on in their adulthood, and they are people capable of change, and they are people who have empathy. And then I think there was a time where I was like, they should have just gotten it right all the time
Yeah.
when I was really little. And
Yep.
these days, now that I'm older, I'm realizing that like th- they deserve the same amount of patience that they've been giving me, or
So true.
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know.
No, yeah, and then I like again like that. I think that's the most you can do. Like let
Mhm.
them kind of grow in their own space, and we can't force like as much as like I wanted to back then, and a little bit now to be like, this is what I experienced. Like, why didn't
Yeah.
you do X, Y, Z? Like, I feel like I messed up. No, I'm not. But
Yeah.
it's like, but I feel like there were things that I wish they could have done better, and obviously, like they didn't know then and
Mhm.
they're still like in the
They didn't
process
have
of
the
learning
resources.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they didn't have the resources. They only had each other. Like literally, my grandparents were around, but they were in California. Like,
Mhm.
my mom's like parents weren't around. They were in the Philippines. So it was really just the two of them here in New Jersey. Um yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
as much as like I'd want them to understand, it's one of those things that like we can only just give them the space and respect
Yeah.
and room to grow instead of like chastising them and bringing them down for everything
Yeah.
they did do wrong, quote, or like, didn't do.
I'm realizing like it's a shift in perspective of like there was a time I used to think they were doing wrong, and these days I'm
Yeah.
like they didn't have the resources and the accessibility
Hmm.
for their own mental and emotional health, and the resources and accessibility for just having income, and they were struggling in the most alien place for them
Yeah.
Yeah.
to
But
be
if
in
I
this
can have like
country.
a
Yeah.
child who, went above and beyond and like did this, I don't know. That's where I, felt a lot of pressure from.
No, definitely.
That's true.
But
That's
it's a good
true.
thing because we now something kind of like I mentioned last time we recorded, but we can kind of take that and kind of shape our own way of parenting. And
Hmm.
this
I
time
like that.
around, when we have our kids or anybody that we're taking care of or raising, I think that it'll be a mix of how our parents are, and now it's like our own kind of American twist to
I
it.
know, you get
I
to
think
add a
that's so
little
cool.
extra.
Yeah, I'm
It's part of
excited
that.
because I don't know
It's
how that's
really,
gonna be, but I'm excited.
we're
Yeah.
building a legacy. They
Yes.
immigrated us here, and like sometimes I'm driving in the car and I'm thinking about like when I have a kid, like we're adding like a an extra generation into this country that my parents
Yes.
went out of their way to come here for. And
Hmm.
I
like
didn't even think
I
about it like that.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
get so like excited about that because in my head I'm like,
Yeah.
in the next 5 years I am dropping a baby. It like,
I hope to, but let's see.
yeah, that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I didn't even realize it was an hour
Oh
already,
my god.
so all this talk we got into such serious conversations, and I just I wish we could just talk. We could talk for hours, and I'm definitely gonna want to have you
Well,
guys back
invite us
because
back
there's so
again.
definitely because and have
Yeah.
more recordings that are hopefully safe.
Oh my, well, I wanted to say that like last time when the recording didn't save, well, last time when it ended, I was like, we could have talked for 2, 3 hours.
I know.
We
I was like,
could
this could
have.
still go
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
like,
then
so
when you said
serious.
the recording didn't save, I was like, don't worry, me and Gabby have your
We
back. We'll
got
come up with new, fun,
Yeah.
fresh content, like, because we
Yes.
could talk forever about this stuff. It's our experience, so it's naturally like palpable.
Yeah, I'm glad that
Yeah.
I mean, I never thought I was alone, but I'm glad that we share the same experiences because although everybody's different, we're kind of similar, it's
Hmm.
cool to know that we're all just
Yeah.
going through life but also doing it together. So, thank you guys. I really
Yeah.
appreciate
Oh, thank you for having
Thank
us
you for
on here,
having us.
Feline.
it.
Look at pictures of yourself from your childhood and tell me if they jog your memories.
Oh my god, I
I
have the
will.
bowl
I will
cut.
definitely let you know about that.
Yeah. Yeah, tell me, Celine. If it like does something for you, tell me.
I will. And that's it for now. Thank you guys so much for joining. It was really exciting to have two of my friends on this episode, and I hope you guys had a lot of fun talking about just what it's like being a Filipino. If you have any questions, concerns, or topics you'd like me to talk about, especially during this month, it's super important to me. Feel free to reach out to me at Instagram and TikTok and Twitter. Instagram and TikTok are at Feeling Feline Podcast, and my Twitter is at Feeling Feline. And that's it for now, you guys. Till next time. Bye.